Hello and welcome! Today we're going to be talking about Trails of Cold Steel 2, and I don't think I've been more torn on one of these games until this one. Because in some ways, I think Trails of Cold Steel 2 has some of my favorite moments in the entire series in it, especially in one of the ending sequences, is one of absolutely incredible moment. I adore that moment. It is now one of my favorite deaths in a series. But again, not going to spoil anything. This is the non-spoiler section. But I also think that this game has some of the more frustrating mechanics that I've seen introduced in the series, and I'll get into those in a minute, as well as some weird story beat choices in the early game, and then really strangely at the midpoint, there's a really weird decision. But we'll get into all that. If you don't want to hear any spoilers, I absolutely still recommend Trails of Cold Steel 2. Fully believe you should at least play Trails of Cold Steel, but you should probably also play the Crossbell duology first, Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure, because those play a big part in this as well. And then, honestly, if you're going to play those, you should probably play Trails in the Sky as well. Just follow the journey that I've taken over the last 6 months. 7 games in now, and I'm still loving it. These games are still incredible. What a great RPG franchise that I should have checked out sooner, right? But for a non-spoiler thing, 100% think you should play this game. The issues that I have are almost fully mechanical, and the story more than makes up for that. I just think this will be one of those games that I have a little bit of a hard time going back for a New Game Plus run on. However, that's where we'll start our real discussion here, because New Game Plus is an issue with this game. I was warned ahead of time that I would need to have a completed save to be able to experience everything. And I said, no, for the sake of the review, I will play it with a completely new file, as if it had never been played before, right? So that I can see what that first player experience is like. And so you may say, well, then you don't get to complain about not having access to the New Game Plus stuff because you had the option to download a save. Yes, but I would also argue that your standard Joe off the street is probably not going to download a save either. And if I want to get somebody into the series, I can't say, well, just make sure you download a save first and expect them to probably do it. So, what do you lose out on by not having New Game Plus? Well, first off, you lose out on a very important cutscene that Cold Steel 3 expects you to know of. I've been warned about this multiple times, and I have since gone back and watched that cutscene after having finished the game. Also went back and finished the Azure credits, by the way, so I got to see all that stuff too. But the other thing that you don't get is bonding points. You don't get enough of them, just like Cold Steel 1, right? And in Cold Steel 1, it was a problem because you were trying to learn the characters. But at the end of the day, it wasn't, you didn't have to have those to get the final ending, like the bonding scene with the character, right? In Cold Steel 2, you do. And also, there are times where you have multiple, like, bonding points that you can spend on a character to further their story. And at one point, there's 3 of them that have it, as well as 2 other characters, and they gave me 5 bonding points. And it's just like, man, come on. And I get it, right? New Game Plus, go back through, you get access to everything. You gotta pick and choose what you get on the first playthrough. But this game is much longer than some of the other ones, even longer than Trails SC or Trails from Zero, right? Or Trails to Zero, or Trails to Azure, sorry. Those games are not that long comparatively. And Cold Steel 1 was fairly long too, but Cold Steel 2 is longer. And so it just feels like, yeah, especially like if you've come to it now, if you had played it at the time, I could see absolutely a replay before Cold Steel 3 and Cold Steel 4, but I'm trying to move through these games, man. I don't have time to stop and replay Cold Steel 2 all the way through again. So I did look the scene up on YouTube, and it's really frustrating to me because one scene, whatever, I can look that up. That's no problem, you know? But I know there's little character moments that I missed out on because I just didn't have enough bonding points. And especially when characters get handed to you just for one free day, it's like, well, I want to go spend that bonding point with this character then because I want to know what's going on with them, but that's one less bonding point I can spend on these other characters that I know and love and want to spend on. Yeah, that's probably my biggest complaint. We'll go ahead and get the complaints out of the way. That way we can go into gushing about how good everything else is. Because my other two complaints are pretty simple. My second biggest complaint is mechanical, and it is the way that accuracy has been changed in this game. It was very common for a long time for me to just miss with my melee characters. And you say, well, Trey, the obvious answer to that is use arts so you don't miss, right? Okay, so I've got to use a lot of arts then on enemies that are harder to hit. And where I think this really messes with things for me is that I can get around it, right? So if I'm going to use a lot more arts, then I need to use either EP cuts or get extra art attacks, quartz, or equipment put on my characters, right? So I'm taking up slots to do that, but that's fine. The casters were probably going to get those anyway, most likely. But if I want everybody to be able to hit with that, then I've got to do that for everybody, right? So I kind of min-maxed and gave the casters those, and everybody else, I just gave accessory equipment or accessory hit quartz, right? The problem with that is that then I kind of needed those slots or that equipment for something else, but I couldn't take it off because if I did, Reen was going to start missing again because he would have 0 accuracy. And I feel like they did that so people would use arts more and not just rely on crafts. But what it came down to at the end was just, if I want to be effective, I cannot fully focus down a build the way that I want to, like I did with CS1. And it just wound up being incredibly frustrating, this aspect of, okay, I can get around this, but I wish I didn't have to. You know what I mean? Like, I can deal with other status effects. If I don't want to equip something that will prevent freeze, I can use an item to get around freeze. I can't use an item to get around 0 accuracy. And even 50 accuracy is a huge improvement. It is drastic increase in the amount of hits as compared to missing. And so it just feels really weird to me of like, well, yeah, we tweaked the formula, so now you have to have this dedicated. And again, maybe I missed out on something that would have made that much easier to deal with, but it did make it really annoying for my melee characters to try and get in there and fight if I wanted to focus down a build, you know? At the same time, there are ways around it. It wasn't really an issue towards the end of the game because I had everybody kitted out. And after a point, the game stops removing quartz and gear from characters for you, which is a huge relief. So you can kind of just leave that stuff on them and you're good to go. My last complaint, and this, I promise, this is the last complaint. After this, I only have gushing to do, is the way that the story's laid out. In the first chunk of the game, you have... okay, we're going to have to go into spoilers for this. In the first chunk of the game, you have Reen going to pick up, all spoilers from here, Reen going to pick up his classmates, right? The rest of Class 7. And as he's going to pick them up, it follows this very strict structure of Valimar goes somewhere, Valimar has to rest, you go and you find one member, and then you find the next member, and you get the third member, and then you have a boss fight that ends in Valimar fighting. And the boss fight is against one of the incredible cast of villains in this game that I'm going to get into in a little bit. And it's fine. I don't have a problem with it being that over and over again. But I would have liked maybe something different in between. Maybe you get some of the party members a little bit later. It feels a little weird to go, okay, I know exactly how this is going to go. We're going to land here. We're going to go check it out. We're going to find one member. That member is going to lead us to the other members. We're going to fight a boss fight. We're going to call in Valimar for a mech fight. Mech fights, by the way, even better in this game. But after that, there is one other weird story laid out thing, which is in the middle portion of the game, in Act 2, where I'm going to get to intermission in a minute because I love the intermission in this game. In Act 2, you have these 4 shrines, right? And you do one of the shrines in Part 3 of Act 2, and then you do 3 of the shrines in Part 4 of Act 2. Why not just have me do one shrine each act? I mean, yes, that would have been just as formulaic as before, but then I wouldn't have had to do 3 dungeons in a row when I'm ready to move to the next story beat, because there's a big story thing coming. We're gonna go get Crow. We're gonna talk about Crow in a minute. I just feel like there was really weird layout when And who knows? Again, maybe I could have done those in Act 1 and 2 and just didn't realize it. But let me know your thoughts on those complaints, as I'm sure that you will in the comment section. Because from here on, I just want to talk about the good, what I loved about this game. I think the journey to reunite Class 7 is really solid. I think that the stuff where you get introduced to a character and they have a touching reunion with Rean and everything's great, you know, that's cool. And the best one of them, it's really funny to me because the best one of them is Machias, because he's the first one. And so when Rean sees him, he's overcome with emotion and he hugs him. And it's really funny to me because each of the girls that Rean could romance wind up having this very romantic reunion with him, right? Where they'll hug him or they'll hold his hand or something, because you could have romanced them in Cold Steel 1, right? But Machias gets the hug from Rean and not the girls. And I just thought that was really fun. That Rean is just like, yep, there's Machias, gotta hug him. And I was honestly expecting him to do that for everybody else, and he doesn't, and it made me a little sad. But it was a really fun reunion, and slowly picking them back up again, reuniting with them all, is really good. I think that part of the game is very slow, but I think that part of the game builds up really well. The stuff in Ymir is also really good. Where Vita shows up and you don't exactly, you want to trust her, but you know you can't. Rean's dad gets hurt. There's a lot going on there, you know? Princess Alphen and Elise get kidnapped. But the best part about that section of the game to me is that you get to play with Toby, with Toval at your side. You just get to have him in your party, and that's so cool. I love that. There's a lot to love about that early game. But as much as I love that early game, the mid game and on is where Cold Steel 2 really grabbed me. So Intermission. Intermission is an incredible chapter where you just get, as Rean, to sit down with the villains. It's very similar to in Sky SC, where Estelle gets captured, right? But the difference is that it's not, well, you know, you're here, maybe you'll join up with us, maybe you won't, haha. It's, no, we actually, like, really want you to join up with us. Like, we expect you to join up with us. But if you don't, that's okay too. And you can go to each of the rooms and talk to each of the villains and get to know them better. This cast of villains, by the way, is great. And then you get to have a moment with Crow that you so desperately needed. Because, so with Estelle hunting down Joshua, right? You knew, because you had played as Joshua, you knew without a shadow of a doubt, Joshua loved Estelle, right? That's why he ran off in the first place. So you know when she's looking for him that he, as much as he doesn't want her to find him, also wants her to find him, right? With Rin, you know that she cares deeply for Joshua and for Estelle. And so when they're chasing her down and trying to rescue her, even though she says she doesn't want help, she keeps giving them clues as to where she is, you know? With Kia and the SSS, you have her, you know, not wanting them to find her, but also wanting them to find her. And it's just this really powerful need to go rescue her, right? But with Crow, we didn't know at the start of CS2 if he actually wanted Rean to come and save him, right? Because he has his own goal, which he has completed as far as he believes, and now he's just kind of along for the ride. And so this little moment where their friendship gets to show again really cements for you that, yeah, Crow is doing what he thinks he needs to do, but there's a part of him that really does want Rean to win. And it just renews your desire to go rescue Crow again. Intermission's great. It's a great chapter. Getting to spend some time with Altina and with Duvalie and with McBurn. Yeah, and even Blue Blanc, right? It's Zeno and Leonidas. That whole chapter is great. The escape where Rean finally accepts his power and is able to use it. It's very, very good. And yet again, it cements that Crow doesn't hate Rean at all, just as we knew. He really still likes and wants to be with Rean, but can't. And it makes their dynamic really powerful. In a lot of ways, their dynamic is what I wanted Kira and Athrans from Gundam Seed to be. And I really loved this section of the game. Then after that, you go to start collecting students from all across Erebonia and trying to rebuild the Courageous and get the crew up. And there's a lot of fun to be had there as you have the different decks on the ship and stuff you can mess around with there. You can customize the motorcycle. You can get horses. There's a lot of fun stuff to do in there that none of it is like necessary, but I still really enjoyed building up the crew. I made sure to get every student. I had to have them all on the ship. And there was just a lot of joy to be had for me riding around Erebonia, picking people up, going to help classmates' parents and rescue cities. And I do really like, too, that they're faced with the hypocrisy of we're not going to help the Imperial Army, but the actions that we're doing are helping the Imperial Army, but we also don't really have a choice because the things that the members of the Noble Alliance are doing are not okay, and they didn't have a good enough grip on that. And that, of course, comes down to Duke Cayenne and his own worthlessness in a lot of ways, his own inability to be a good leader. But that was just a really fun, enjoyable portion of the game, building up Valimar so that he'd be ready to take on Ordine, you know? The problem, I do think it's a little too long, but I could have ended it faster if I hadn't been so set on trying to get every student. I'm aware of that, right? I had to go to every road to make sure I didn't miss anybody. But I do think it's really good. Where it all comes to a head is in the attempt to take back Trista, right? And rescuing Trista and the really powerful moments there. Which, granted, I do think that fight against Patrick Higharms is a little anticlimactic after all that you've been through. But hey, you got other places you got to fight people, and you've already beaten V at that point, and he has died. And you've beaten S, and you were just barely able to save her. There's a lot going on, you know? So I get it. But then you go to save the Imperial family. And from there, you go to Valflame Palace. And it leads to my favorite moment in this game, which is after you fight, you have some great fights, right? You fight Duvali and Blue Bonk, and then Taval and Olivert show up, and you fight Mick Byrne, and Victor Arcade shows up, and you fight Zeno and Leonidas, and they leave you with a really interesting thing about Fee and the boss that you don't quite know how to handle. And then Claire and Sharon show up, you know. But you fight Crow, and you beat Crow. And he's willing to go with you then. You've promised to take him to graduation. He's willing to go with you. Everything's great. Duke Cayenne flips. The Vermilion Knight, Testarossa. The Vermilion Apocalypse, right? Vermilion Calamity happens. And you go to fight it with Crow. And there's this little voice in the back of my mind going, yeah, we rescued Crow. Everything's great. But he can't just go back to school. He shot the Chancellor. Like, he's a wanted felon. If we don't win this, he's going to wind up, or if we win this, he's going to wind up going to prison. He can't just go back to school. And about that time, he gets hit. And he says, it's just a scratch. And my brain goes, no, it's not. And we win the fight, and we save Cedric, and Crow is dying. And there's a bunch of really powerful moments in this one, but it's where Emma is desperately trying to heal him, and Vita is going, yeah, it's no good. He's not going to make it. He got hit in the heart. He got hit very poetically in the exact spot that he shot the Chancellor, right? He's done. And Crow, he has this incredible moment where he's like, yeah, this is about what I expected. This is how it always had to be, you know? But keep moving forward. My time is done. I can't go with you anymore. But I believe in you. And everybody gets a chance to respond. And it's a really powerful moment. And then Crow dies. And I think what makes that moment hit so hard is that in Sky, when you wanted to go rescue Joshua, you rescued Joshua. In Crossbell, when you wanted to rescue Ren, you rescued Ren. When you wanted to go rescue Kia, you rescued Kia. You've spent the end of Cold Steel 1, all of Cold Steel 2 to go rescue Crow. And you don't get to do it. And I have said in the past that it felt like these games were far more ready to kill characters off in the Sky trilogy, right? I mean, you look at Louvet, as we learn his name is pronounced in this game, not Lo. The Blade Lord, he was a great character, you know, cut short. And Cold Steel has proven that it is also not afraid to do that. I really like Crow. And I was holding out okay during all of it. I was doing fine. I was doing good, man. Holding all those emotions in, paying attention to the ending. And then they play that first credit sequence. And it has that I Will Remember You song about Crow from Reen. And it got me and I broke. But I think what makes it stand out so much is that Reen did his best. It wasn't that Reen messed up. It's that they just weren't strong enough. And immediately after that, you find out the Chancellor is alive. And everything has gone according to his plan. And it reminds you again that this class of children, they're good, right? They're strong. They fought so hard. They've done so much. And it's just not enough. Because this man is so much stronger than they are. And whereas you have that moment in Sky where you realize Joshua and Estelle are not enough on their own, right? Even with Kevin Graham there, they are not enough on their own. And Louvet has to sacrifice himself to grant them safety, right? Then in Crossbell, you have that moment where the SSS just is not enough, and Arios McLean is there, right? Here, there isn't anybody to show up and save them, right? The person that could have done so, the person that probably could have saved Crow, would not. And where you're gaining in levels, you're getting stronger, Reen's becoming better and better as the pilot of the Ashen Knight, everything's going great, it all just comes crashing down again as you realize the dominating presence that the Blood and Iron Chancellor has. Gileath Osborne walks onto that stage, onto that platform, and you realize suddenly everything that you have done has been nothing compared to the planning that he has done. And the only saving grace is that Crow died before he got to realize that he failed. That V died thinking that Crow had succeeded. Now, unfortunately, Scarlet is going to find out that C failed. And that feels like the end, right? But it's not. Because where this game really shines, I think, is in the divertisement and the epilogue. Because you have that terribly tragic moment of Crow's sacrifice, right? You have that credit sequence with a song that is just made to pull your heartstrings as you know that Crow is gone, right? A member of Class C is forever taken from them, or Class 7 is forever taken from them and cannot be given back, right? And then you go straight to, hey, Crossbell's being taken over by the Empire. Let's go. You're playing as Lloyd and Ruchia now. Let's go. And then you have to fight Reen and Altina. You have to fight them both. And it just, oh, I loved it so much. And to go from there straight into, hey, Reen is not an Ironblood. He's very upset with the Ironbloods. But he's now the hero of Erebonia. He's the Ashen Chevalier. And he can't just not help the Imperial government. And so his hands are tied, and he gets to go back to the school, but he's going to have to stay, and everybody else is going. And there are these great moments in the classroom because there's like a full 4 hours more game to go here, right? Maybe 3 hours, I guess. But like, there's these great moments in the classroom where everybody's talking, and then there'll be a moment of silence where you realize this is where Crow would have spoken. This is where Crow would have added something in. Or somebody will make a reference to Crow and will look over at his desk, and he's not there. And it makes that tragedy hit so much harder that you don't just have the death, you then have to immediately deal with the ramifications of it. Yeah, he's gone. And you have Millium, who should be excited that Gilead Osborne is alive again, who's also not excited because Crow was still a member of Class 7, you know? You have these little moments, and I think the big one, of course, is the moment where Rean breaks when Toa tells him he doesn't have to be strong. And he apologizes to her that he couldn't bring Crow back so they could graduate. And again, because every time before that you've gone to save somebody, it's worked. You feel that. It feels like a failure because you didn't succeed this time. It wasn't your fault, but you didn't get him. You didn't rescue him. And so it feels like you failed. So you can feel that right along with Rean. And then, oh man, everything going into the final dungeon, which again, I don't know that we necessarily needed that final dungeon or that we even necessarily needed that final boss, but everything going into the final dungeon where you can buy those mirrors and put Crow in your squad by equipping a male character with the facsimile of Crow. What? And then you can get specialized battle victory quotes between Crow and your characters. He'll comment on Millium, or he'll comment on Laura, or he'll comment on Rean, and Rean will say something to the effect of like, well, I couldn't let you stay ahead of me forever. Just, oh, my heart. And when you finally beat that final boss, Class 7 realizes they have to split up. This is the time, right? They'd already made plans. They all knew it was coming. This is the last moments where they get to be Class 7, right? Class 7 is done. And they start to cry. And I'm such a sucker for it. And it gets me every time. The spirit of Crow is standing off to the side, and he chuckles. Because he needed to be there for Class 7's final moments. And it got me. I'm such a sucker for that. I really, really like this game. I think Cold Steel 2 did a lot for the characters. It did a lot for Elliot. It did a lot for Machias. It did a lot for everybody, really. Fee got even better. Laura got even better. The only character that I think kind of didn't grow in this game that much was Elisa, but I didn't spend any bonding points on her because I don't really like Elisa, and so I missed out on all her growth that she potentially could have had. Yeah, I'm so torn on this game, man, because story-wise, I love it. Mechanics-wise, I don't, and I think that in itself leads so much to the fact that I probably won't be replaying it anytime soon. I think the villains in this game are incredible. V is still good. S is still good. Crow is still top tier. McBurn is really interesting and cool. Duvali is great. That moment where she's just like, well, I'm not gonna tell you. I loved it so much. Zeno and Leonidas are really, really good. And then, of course, you have Rufus, and you have Claire, and Lecter, and they're not villains, right? But they're Ironbloods. They're working for Gilead Osborne. You have Altina, and her weird, interesting dynamic with Rean. In a lot of ways, it feels like Altina... I feel like there's always a child character, right? So in Trails, you have Joshua, Estelle, and they have Ren. You have the SSS and Kia. And there was a moment on the Pantagruel where it felt like Rean and Altina had that same style of connection. And then, of course, you fight them both in Crossbell. But we'll see what's to come in Cold Steel 3, I guess. I haven't even talked about the revelation about Rean's parentage. The stuff with Instructor Thomas. There is so much in this game that I really do want to go back and replay CS1 and CS2 to have like full context on Crow and on Instructor Thomas and on Rufus Alberea and on everything going on there. But at the same time, they're both very long games, and I don't enjoy the mechanics of fighting in Cold Steel 2. I don't find the battles as enjoyable because I'm not able to play around with the builds as much. I don't think missing so much would bother me if not for the fact that you can get countered. And so when you miss a boss 4 times in a row because you have 0 accuracy, that hurts. I do think, too, that the addition of that final dungeon, while a cool idea, it added extra length to a game that I don't think necessarily needed it. And at that point, I really just wanted to see the ending, right? I wanted to see the class separate and see where they're going from here, much as I didn't want them to ever have to leave each other. And I'm very excited to see where this story's going. We got to liberate Crossbell, We gotta get the band back together with Class 7. And more importantly, we gotta strike down Gileath Osborne. We gotta beat him. I do think, I didn't talk about it yet because I really wanted to bring this up. The moment where Reen, overcome with fury, grabs Gileath Osborne and is like, was his life for nothing? I love that moment so much. That moment is incredible. There's a lot more, too, with the New Game Plus papers and the story there that I have read, with the history and everything going on there with the Great One. There's a whole lot more to learn and understand as we go into the next couple games. But I am very excited to continue on with this series. I didn't enjoy Cold Steel 1 and 2 mechanically as much as I wanted to, as much as I enjoyed some of the other games because of how slow the buildup is. But Sky FC, Trails from Zero less, right? Sky FC is the build-up to 2 incredible games. Trails from Zero is a great game building up to an incredible game. Cold Steel 1 and 2 are good. Cold Steel 2, the end specifically, that whole rush at the end is great. And I'm looking forward to Cold Steel 3 and 4 because if it is to follow the trend, then 3 and 4 will most likely be incredible. Yeah. I'm really torn on how I would rank it right now. Sky SC is still number 1 for me, followed by Azure, followed by Zero. No, followed by Sky 3rd, followed by Zero. And then I would probably go Cold Steel 2, Sky FC, Cold Steel 1, even despite all the mechanical stuff I don't like, just because by the end of the game, you got a whole bunch of characters and they're all really cool, and they actually give you more than enough equipment and more than enough Master Quartz to go around where all of them can be useful in a really cool way. I like it a lot. I just wish that it didn't have some of the mechanical issues. And again, I wish it wasn't so long. Because I really love those Crow moments, and I want to go back and experience them again, but I got to start at Ymir, work my way through, to be able to get to that moment in Valflame Palace again. Which, again, of moments in the franchise, that is top 5 for me. Crow's death is incredible, because I honestly didn't expect it. I really thought we were going to get him back and he was going to graduate and then he would get thrown in jail somewhere, right? I honestly thought that. And then to immediately be followed with, hey, the Chancellor's alive. And there was always like this little part of me that was like, yeah, he probably is, right? Like this guy's been built up so much. To take him out this early in the franchise, that'd be odd, right? But then to have it just immediately, like a slap in the face to Crow's death, it just, and again, like I said, the only positive thing of Crow's death, other than how exquisite the tragedy is, and I am a sucker for good tragedy, is that he never had to find out that he failed, Let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. I'm very excited to continue Reen's journey. I have been spoiled on one thing about the next game, but I'm not going to say it here because obviously that's a spoiler. But I'm very excited to see where the next 2 games take our characters, and I have been told that from this point on, the crossovers to Sky and Crossbell happen way more often, which excites me even more because I love those characters. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. And until next time, I've been Trey. This has been The Full Spectrum. Remember to always enjoy the full spectrum. Cold Steel 2 has to offer.